Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to one and all. My name is Ram. I'm from Quintype. I run quality and solution consulting in Quintype. Welcome to the Core Web Vitals webinar. We are going to focus more on what is this Core Web Vitals about and what is the significance of not conforming to it, what we have done in Quintype towards this Core Web Vitals and all these things. So along with me, I have Anish and Jeevan talking about some parts of this webinar. The webinar is going to be in a format of fireside chat types. I'm going to ask a few questions to Anish and then to Jeevan, and we're going to share our experiences that we're going through. So before starting, so a quick introduction about Quintype. I'm sure that a lot of you folks might have known about Quintype, but at Quintype, we offer a headless CMS SaaS-based solution. We help publishers in creating a content, engaging and monetizing the content. We also offer an out-of-the-box front-end solution, front-end application. We call it as Page Builder Array, and also have a library which helps front-end library which helps any tech team as a startup pack for their front-end application. So having said that, let me share my screen. All right. A lot of you might have been known this already, but I'm just going to make it as a customary slide to start the presentation. What is a search algorithm, right? Why a lot of folks are talking about that. Search algorithms are a series of algorithms used by the search engines. Why do you need any such algorithms? To facilitate the user, what results are being seen by the end user? Are they really relevant? Is it going to be, more the irrelevant results, more people are going to bounce off from the result page, right? So how relevant the search results are, how quick an user can find the content, what they're looking for. How much contextual is this search results? In the SEO world, we call it as SERP, search engine results page, where how relevant the results are in terms of the context, in terms of the location, who's looking for a query, what time of the day it's being searched, and a lot more parameters. I'm just trivializing this a bit here, but a lot more parameters are involved there. Also, one other objective is to serve a good quality content to the end user. And also the usability of the page. So specifically publishing world, especially in news publishing, the breaking news is being served by a lot more news publishers. So after an hour of breaking news, the same content is going to be there in more than one site, right? So usability is an important factor while searching and retrieving the results and showing to the end user, right? So that usability is also one important factor in presenting this content to the end user. This is a basic, definition of a search algorithm. Moving on, why so much buzz of late about the core web vitals algorithm? In fact, in general, a lot of updates which kept releasing from the search providers, right? Search engine providers. So I've tried to compile a list of anxieties the publisher might go through whenever there is an update in the algorithm. Even though we're going to focus more on the core web vitals, probably I thought we'll take a step back and then list this. And it'd be very interesting to see a lot of publishers out there if we can ping other anxieties, what you're going through, other pain points, what you're going through. Whenever there is a search algorithm, probably we can discuss this at the end of this webinar as well. A common list could be, is my SERP ranking is going to be impacted after every search algorithm update? Is my bounce rate going to increase or decrease, right? People in general, I'm sure that a lot of digital heads out there who, and the SEO team knows, in the SEO team is going to monitor the day in, day out traffic and see these parameters every day. Now, this is one of the common thing where till today, the bounce rate is in control, and tomorrow morning, suddenly after some viral event, it's going to be bounced off. The bounce rate is going to be increased. Average session duration, as I don't have to really explain a lot about this. More time the user is hooked upon on a page, the average time the user is spending in a specific session, more the engagement is going to be. Whether it is going to be impacted or not is one other common question a lot of publishers are thinking about constantly. Obviously the ad revenue. All these factors are eventually going to impact the ad revenue. Is there any disturbance in bounce rate or average session or any kind of engagement? The ad revenue is going to get impacted. Obviously the engagement rate. Is there any factor which suddenly hitting the engagement rate? The real-time traffic and the all other above parameters also going to be impacted. Is there going to be any iteration on that? Not but the least, conversion rate, right? Is it going to be any impact on the conversion rate? Till today, this fraction of users are getting converted, but how about tomorrow morning? Is it going to be a new update which is going to impact me? Right. These are the common anxieties. Having said all these things, I would like to slowly move towards a chat mode of the webinar. I'd like to invite Anish, who is our head of delivery in Quintite, who is meeting a lot of publishers day in, day out. So Anish, I would like to ask a question to you. What's about this core web vitals, right? Why so much of buzz of late about this core web vitals? What's the objective of this core vitals? If you can help us about that, would be great. Anish, you're in mute.
Yeah, so thank you, Ram. Before we actually check out the core web vitals, we also have to understand the reasoning behind why Google has brought core web vitals as a factor for ranking, right? So it all depends on how your user interacts with your page. It's all about the user experience, right? So as you know, that user experience is actually a qualitative factor where you cannot quantify that, okay, unless and until you bring in some metrics in order to find out how people are interacting with your website, how are they getting what they came for to visit the website. If it's a newspaper website, in that case, then are they able to start reading the story instantly when they come to the website? If it's an e-commerce website, in that case, then are they able to start exploring the products or start buying the product as soon as they reach the page or not? It's all about the experience factors, right? So the reason this was there from the start, if you have a good experience website, in that case, then yeah, people will always visit back to your website. That means that your returning visitors will be high. That means that if they are visiting your site and then if things are happening faster, and that means then they will actually navigate from one page to another, explore more, spend more time in the website, right? So that was already there. But why? And this is actually one of the things that which Google also wanted to find out, that how do you measure that? And Google came up with multiple iterations of algorithms and metrics in order to find out that what is actually the quantitative metric which can be used in order to identify this. Now, in the late 2000, and then from the start they were actually talking when Google started, and then they came to the search engine ranking properly, and then the new algorithm updates came in. From the start itself, Google was telling that make sure that your page is much more faster, right? In 2018, 2019, Google mentioned that we are going to start ranking the sites based on the experience, right? During the time, the metric was different. Okay? It was evolving. In 2019, end of 2019, Google announced that by 2021, they'll be considering this as a core ranking factor, and they had mentioned that it will be during the start to mid of the year 2021, and then now it has actually happened. So it was planned for May 2021, but it got delayed again, and now it's started. Means from July end and August, it has started rolling out that, and this will be this will not be a fast rollout. It will be a small stagnant rollout, is what Google has mentioned. Now, why this is actually important right now is that everyone is actually competing with each other, right? So if you have sites which you have competitors who have the same quality of content, same style of content, the only upper hand that you have, one, most important, the quality of the content, okay, which actually gives the highest pace for you to grow. Second one is actually the experience that the user finds in when you are visiting the website. Now, the boom which actually happens right now, it's actually because of Google rolling out the update. We started like starting end of last month and is moving on from this month, and it might even go to the next month also.
Great. So, Anish, before diving deep into this, right? Recently, I was talking to a few of our customers, especially in the publishing world, right? A common question, everyone is asking is, how do I track my algorithms, right? As a person who's running a digital newsroom, am I supposed to invest in a full-fledged SEO team who's going to who has to keep track of all the algorithm updates, every small update? Should I go back and then tweak my tech stack or what? Is it something which is a very common question? What do you think, Anish, before getting into what the digital metrics of core web vitals?
Yeah, so usually what happens is that Google announces the algorithm way before it actually is rolled out. And they had in 2019, they had released a single algorithm document, which actually mentioned about that. It was whatever updates are core updates are happening are actually imposing more details into the same algorithm they have updated. But in order to get like what is actually happening and what are the algorithm updates which are happening in that case, then what we do and what I do personally is to follow the Twitter feeds from Google search liaison, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also looking at the blog that Google is releasing, and also watching out. It's not only Google, but there are other sites like Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, who are actually, whenever there's an update happen, they actually give more information about what is that update about and how does it impact publishers. And we also, what we do is that if there is a very uh, huge change is going to happen in that case, then we also send out newsletters and also inform our publishers that this rollout is going to happen, and so that they can be prepared about that. It might be a tech, it might be tech specific, it might not be tech specific, it might be a content specific also. So we keep informing our publishers that this is going to happen, and this is actually the way that we feel that will actually change the schema of search results. And this is actually what you can actually do in order to be in the pace of getting more traction.
Sure. So what you're trying to say is there is no question of not conforming to the algorithm updates to be very specific, this core web vitals update. Uh,
Yes.
Right. So you started talking about the user experience, right? So what I understood is the user experience is what the basis on which the whole core web vital metrics has been constructed, right? So probably let's talk about the individual metrics of core web vitals.
Sure. So I hope that you can see my screen, right, Ram?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the core web vitals is not a new, Google has not brought in a new idea here, right? So Google has actually just started to take the qualitative metric into a quantitative metric. So for any website, the most important, there are three parts which are the most important part, apart from the content, right? Content quality is something different. I'm only talking from the tech standpoint. One is the page load, how fast the page is loading. Okay, that means that how fast a user, when they types in the website name, how fast they are able to see the content. Okay, that is actually the factor number one for any UX to happen. It's irrespective of whether it's a news website or it's an e-commerce website or it's a normal corporate website. That's true for any of that. The second one is actually the interactivity. A user has come to the site to do something, right? A function. It might be to read, it might be to purchase something, or it might be to explore what's the site about, right? So how fast can you allow the user to start interacting with the website? That's actually the interactivity that you are giving in. Third is actually the visual stability, right? So they have came in to visit the site, they are looking at the site, and then it should be a case where they can actually start reading the content then and there itself, like how fast the page is loaded, everything is settled, is what actually meant by visual stability. That's actually required. Now, what Google did is that these are the three parameters that which is actually mainly important for any user experience to be better, right? When coming to the website. So these are all qualitative, right? You cannot quantify that. So what Google has brought in is actually the core web vitals, which are actually the metric which will actually tell you that based on these numbers, how well the site is doing. Okay, this is not definitive, and this is going to evolve. That Google has specifically mentioned, and we also know that this is going to evolve over time. The numbers might change. It might be that a new metric will also come in, but currently, in the right now, what Google is actually looking at is three factors. Okay, one is the largest contentful paint. Means that when a page is loaded, from the time the page start painting, which is the largest contentful paint, and how much time it took for the largest contentful paint to show up. Okay. Second one is actually the first input delay, which means that it's actually about the first one is actually what I told about the page load. Second one is actually about the interactivity. How much time it took when a user clicks on a button or clicks on a video or clicks on an image, how much time it took to process that command and take to the function. Okay, that is actually the FID. Cumulative layout shifting is that from a span of a page, how much time it took to load the entire page with a stable, without any jerkings or without being stable on that page. Okay, and I will also be mentioning about what are the types of analysis that you can do in order to get the data. Okay, any questions here, Ram?
Yeah, I'm good. So I understand this individual metrics of core web vitals, right? So before we dive deep into the individual metrics, right? I have one other question recently popped up when I was talking to a publisher, right? Um, can I blindly take if I ensure this core web vitals are taken care and I get a good score of each one of them, so that the overall score is also high? Can I take that as a quantitative indicator that I'm going to improve my, the Google ranking, search results ranking, my keywords doing better, and that can that be taken as a only indicator? Anish, what do you think about that?
I can. It's actually a mix of both. Okay, uh, content is actually the king. Okay, it all depends on the content. Now think that the content, uh, your your competitor, who is that? Okay, if and the user, when a person puts a query, that's actually dependent on the query is what the ranking happens. Now your page is faster. Okay, it's not about the numbers. It should be perceived user experience of the site should be faster. Okay, you can load a blank screen for 5 seconds and then you'll have all the scores as heart rate, right? That doesn't make sense. And Google will also not be able to find out that, because this is an analysis that it's a metric that Google is actually trying to find out. Make sure that you check your website, whether it's loading faster, and also check on the core web vitals, whether the numbers are also good. It should be a factor of both. Now, if that happens, in that case, then if your content, if you have a competitor, for the search query that the user has put in, if there are two competition, this will actually become a tiebreaker, right? And think in this way that rather than looking at the ranking part of it, you should actually understand that how Google is actually ranking pages, right? So when Google is ranking pages, Google will obviously give better ranking for the page where the user is actually interacting more and where they got the actual content and they are not bouncing out of the page faster because the page load is high, right? So as a user, if I am going and querying, say for example, I'm putting it like India news. In that case, then when I'm going to the first website, it's taking a lot of time to load. What I will do, I'll go back and go to the second page, right? So that means that there's a bounce happening. Now, if your page is loading faster, that means that the user is going to stay back to your website. Now, Google is actually taking that as because based on the Google Experience Report, Google is taking that also as into consideration, and then it actually ranks you. So this is not like Google is going to rank you based on this number. Your page will be faster, so obviously you'll be ranked. Okay, and this is actually the metric where you can actually check that whether your page is loading faster or not.
Great. Thank you, Anish. And I can't agree more saying that content is the king at the end of the day. Probably I would be interested to know the individual metrics, what the largest contentful page is, FID is, CLS is.
Yeah, Google has actually mentioned that, as I previously mentioned, that what is actually the rendering time for the largest contentful. It might be an image element, it might be a text block, it might be a background image that you have put in. Google is also going to bring in video as a metric for that. What is actually the largest contentful? What is actually the largest contentful paint? Like what is actually the element and how much time it took to load? Okay, and Google is actually looking at a metric where they are telling that 2.5 seconds, below 2.5 seconds is good. Now, below 4.4 seconds is need improvement, but it won't harm you. It's actually in a good state till now. But if it's going behind 4 seconds, is bad. Think from a user perspective itself. If he has to wait for 4 seconds for the largest contentful paint in the viewport to load, in that case, then obviously he will bounce out, right? So that's actually the logic behind that also. That is actually
So,
one of them.
Sure. So thanks, Anish. So on that note, I have a question. So um, if I'm a digital head of a publishing house, should I instruct my content writer to be to constantly look for what is the largest content which is while constructing that article itself? I mean, suppose is my content writer needs to think about I should not put a big image on the top so that LCP is not taken the hit. Should I consciously put a text block there in the first fold instead of an image? Is that necessary?
So it actually depends on your user base, right? So if your the highest number of user base are from mobile, in that case, then you have to serve a better experience for the mobile users, right? And bot also, the Google bot for most of the websites right now, Google has mentioned that mobile bot will be the preference, smartphone bot will be the preference. So look at the mobile screen and see that it doesn't matter whether it's an image or the content, but make sure that that image is loading fast, right? Or if it's a text block, in that case, the text block is loading fast. So that's actually where the trick comes in. It's the content, right? You cannot get away with telling that, okay, I don't want to put image, I'll put a text, because it all depends on how the content depend on the content, right? So just make sure that the whatever content is that, it might be image block, it might be an image block, or it might be something else that you are going to use that, or text block that you're going to use that. In that case, and just make sure that it's loading faster. Okay, that is there. And also uh, in mobile device, you only have 320 to 360 pixel width, right? So don't load only that size of the image. Optimize that. That's what you
So such consciousness is very much required
Yes.
in a digital newsroom, is what I say.
Yeah.
Great. So great.
That,
So
okay. One more thing to add here is that that's not only that it will increase your page speed, it will also reduce your cost also.
I understand. I understand. So probably let's start talking about the next metric,
Yeah.
Anish.
So the first input delay is actually one of the most important factors here. The reason being is that a person came to the website to do a function. Okay. And how much time it actually took to process that function is actually what is the FID calculation here. Now, if what Google says is that if, say, for example, there is a hyperlink, that the user clicks on the hyperlink, and what is actually how much time it took for the page to start processing the request, right, is what Google considers there. So the good, what Google mentions is that below 100 milliseconds, and need improvement is below 300 milliseconds. Now, thinking this way, same what I mentioned in the previous one also, look from a user standpoint. Like if it takes a lot of time when the user clicks on that and then starts processing, it means that you beat the purpose and the user will log out and then they will go to another page, right? So that's actually the FID calculation which Google has mentioned.
So to put it in a different way, can I say this as the first point which makes complete sense to the end user? Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So it actually should be an interaction which happens. It's not a scroll, but it's also a click or play of a video, that kind of functions.
Great, great. I understand this. Probably I'd be more interested to know about the CLS part as well.
Yeah, so CLS is actually one of the most challenging for developers to actually do, and it's actually one which has impact on business also, that which people think is because the cumulative layout shifting from a user perspective, if you are visiting a page and the page is jerking, it's going here and there, the content is not loading, the another ad is loading, an animation came in, a pop-up appears before that. So the user is actually a bad user experience, right? So that's why Google has actually mentioned that a good user experience page will actually load with the least amount of layout shifting, right? So say, for example, you have a text block at the top, and then after like 1 second, another button comes there, and then it actually shifts down, right? Or you have a push down ad at the top of the page. And then when the user is actually started reading that, then the entire layout shifts down. Bad user experience, right? So what Google has actually mentioned is that to keep that below zero point 0.1, the layout shifting, the calculation, which you can actually find out in web.dev. It actually mentions properly about how the calculation happened. Zero point 0.1 is actually below 0.1 is actually good, and below 0.025 is need improvement. Still, you are on the safer zone. Now, why I actually mentioned about the business impact is that this is where the ads comes in, right? Where the ad, so the ad which is might cause the layout to shift. In that case, then you have to find out a proper structure where the ads, you have given proper spacing for the ad to load. Let the box be there, let the ad load in that box, and also making the ads in a way that it's not changing the size, okay, often. So say like the first fold, it has the exact size, and that will actually help you out in that.
So lesser disturbance to the end user, better the CLS score is what you're saying, Anish.
Yes, yes. And that
Understood.
means that they have actually started using your website, right? And they will actually want to come back, or they will actually go to another page because they will spend more time visiting the page.
Understood. That makes complete sense. Having seen all the three metrics, I have another question, and a lot of our customers also ask this in the publishing world. Um, since this standard is given by Google, Core Web Vitals, algorithm update and all, is it going to impact my traffic in outside Google search engines, or how is it?
It's going
Or
to
should I
affect,
consider? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it's going to affect you everywhere, right? So these numbers are, as I mentioned during the start, this is about user experience, right? So even if a web person is visiting your site directly, okay, typing in www and your site name.com, in that case also, it actually matters that whether the user will come back to you. It depends on your user experience, right? So even if you are looking for search engines, or if it's Facebook or any other browser or systems which are actually loading the website, is always important to have a good user experience, right? You will have fantastic content, but what if the users are not able to read that, right? So that's actually where this comes in, and this is only the metric that we can actually find out.
That's correct. That's correct. So before moving to the next part of the webinar, quickly highlight about the page speed index, right? A common way to measure how good is my web page performing, right? So one common way is, it's the most popular way is using page speed insight. Page speed insight is a tool given by Google itself. It gives us two different uh, um, metrics, right? So basically, whenever you give an URL, it's going to give us how good these metrics are performing and where do we stand. Two different things. One is the field data, another thing is lab data. A lot of people must be wondering what are these things, right? The lab data is so whenever we file this test, it's a test, I would say. Whereas Google has a test kind of thing, what we call it as Lighthouse test, which measures all these things, and then in a lab kind of environment, in a testing environment, the metric is computed and then shown to you, right? That we call it as lab data. The other thing is the field data. I'm sure that a lot of people would have recognized that the Chrome user experience report. Chrome kept collecting a lot of such metrics. And what basis this metrics is collected. So general thumb rule is if 75% or more users are experiencing a specific pattern, that's been considered, right? So in this example, what we are seeing the screen, if it says that FCP is 1 second, right, as a field data, which means that 75% of users are getting that first cut and full paint as one second, or LCP 1.4 seconds. So which says that majority of the more than 75% of our users are actually experiencing that. That's what we call it as a field data. And also the page speed insight gives you a list of improvements and possible improvements which you can do to tweak the site so that you can get a better core web vital score as well. That's about page speed insight. So Anish, I have a question to you. Apart from page speed insights, right? We always said that you have shown a metric saying that three ranges, right? Poor, needs improvement, and then good metric. Where can, if I'm a website owner, where can we see all these things, right? How do I track as the owner of a website?
Okay, so as you had mentioned, that page speed insight is actually a good place to check. Okay, where you are developing, making some changes, and then you want to test it out. You can test in the lab report. The field data, as you had mentioned, is actually derived over 28 days, collected over 28 days, which actually tells about that page in the field, right? Now, there is actually one thing which is written there is the origin data. Origin is actually tells you that from the website, usually for all the pages in the website, on an average, what is actually the speed which is there. Now, this is actually what you can actually identify for page speed insights from Google Page Speed Insight. Apart from that, you can also use the Chrome extension, which is actually based on JavaScript itself, which Google has provided, which is available in Google Chrome extension web store, which you can download. One. Second is that you can also use Lighthouse in the console, which is also available. And which is actually the most important part, which you can always use as a tracker, is actually looking at Google Search Console, right? So Search Console gives you core web vitals, all of that information. It also gives you the page experience report, right? Depending on how much amount of your pages are faster, right? But just remember that all of that data is 28 days accumulated. Means that if you make a change, it will take 28 days to show up that result there. That is there, but that's actually a good place to always check, because Google Search Console gives you information about everything, right, about the website. So that's actually a good place for you to check out. Apart from that, if you are technically good, and if you have a team, in that case, then you can actually you have JavaScript available, where you can actually make it as part of your deployment itself, which we are doing, which Jeevan will actually explain more about that. That is actually also something that you can always use.
Great. So are you saying if I'm a website owner and I have a tech team and I've seen some of the metric going wrong and then I get it fixed, some of the metric or improvements, what next? Am I supposed to simply wait for 28 days? Is there a way that I can make this fix realize faster?
Uh, so, okay. So in case of SEO, okay, SEO is actually a very slow process, right? So in order to see that result itself will take time. Now, the thing here is that what you have to look at is the lab data. Don't look at the lab data that the numbers should be good. I agree, but always look at the field data. Okay, that it might be very fast for you. Okay, when you are doing the lab data, when you're analyzing the lab data, excuse me. So you will have your users who will using slower connectivities, right? So always watch that out. Real time basis, the lab is actually the only way that you can actually look at, but also collecting feedbacks directly from users if possible. That's also a good way of doing that.
Great. There's one more question. Quickly, I'm reading out before moving to the next part of the webinar because it might be relevant to the topic what we are talking. Is read more buttons of the world and paywall messages, which comes hides the actual content, is it going to impact the CLS score because it contributes some kind of disturbance to the user, right? Is that layout shift going to impact the CLS score?
It actually depends on how you implement that, right? So say for example, you are showing the entire content and then closing it to show hide the content. In that case, there's a chance that the cumulative layout shifting will actually happen, right? That's because that the content has shifted, right? It has the height of the page has reduced, or the content has reduced. The largest contentful paint has is also impacted, as well as the content is also reduced. So if you can actually do that in a way that only whatever is actually has to be shown is shown faster, and then you load the rest of the content based on like based on the user interaction. That is something that you can actually look at, rather than collapsing that and creating the jerking, because think from, like I mentioned, think from a user perspective, it will be very disturbing for the user.
All right, sure. There's a quick question on that. I'm reading out that before moving that, we are running out of time as well. Someone is asking, do we need to check all the URLs in terms of page speed or homepage URL is fine? Again, it depends. Anyways, your Search Console and other tools are going to give you how many URLs are in the needs improvement bucket, in the good bucket or poor bucket, right? So that indication is something which you always know. And whenever you put a fix, if you have a tech team and they're going to put a fix, probably a good way of sampling will give you indicating number. Obviously, checking all the URLs is going to help. Obviously, something is going to help there. With that point,
Ram, I just want to add one more item to the
sure.
question that is being asked. Uh, you should also look at like your most important pages. Okay, should be fast. Okay, and if there are pages which are not that important, not required, in that case, then make it lighter. Like archive it to a lighter page. That's also something that you can do, because the result ranking is based on the query that a user puts in. If you feel that your that story or that page is going to match most of the queries which are going to come in that case, then make sure that the page is faster, so that you'll have a upper hand on that.
Great, great. So thank you, Anish. Thanks for that detailed explanation. I think time to move to the second part of the webinar where now if you would, I would like to invite Jeevan. Jeevan is part of our tech team. He always claims his religion is JavaScript. And Jeevan, Jeevan, I'd like to ask you, you might want to unmute Jeevan. So I'd like to ask you a few questions on in Quintech, what have we done in terms of fixing or tuning core web vitals, right? And probably you can talk about and list out those items which help us in improving the core web vitals goal and the individual metrics as well. But before you start, I have one pressing question which I would like to ask. As a person who runs a tech team, and we have an engineering team out there, and then these search algorithms keep rolling out, right? How do you manage such frequent updates? Is it going to be proactive, or are you engineering team continuously look for a search algorithm updates and keep incorporates, or do we really need to be reactive and then wait for the feedback from the market? And how do you manage really?
So basically now, hope I'm audible, right?
Yes.
As an engineering team, right, as an attitude of a developer, it's just that we are proactive in all of the events that happen through the industry. If a company like Google is doing something major, which has a direct impact on us or the things we do, it's a proactive approach of not only one person, but the entire team to look forward to what is happening. And we sort of incorporate that into our pipelines, right? If there is something coming to us on priority, that is the first thing we would look at. I don't think there is a need, or there has been a need to follow by somebody. It's all voluntarily done, and yeah, that's how we do it in Quintiles.
Great, thanks. So if we can start talking about a list of changes, what we have tried in the past few months that helped us to improve the overall score and the individual metrics, that would definitely help. I'm sure that there are quite a number of developers out there who are looking for suggestions on this front.
Sure. Just I'll try sharing my screen. Yeah. So I'm just going to skim the surface of what we have implemented with respect to page speed, right, and how we handle it for all of our products, right. So these were some of the things we sort of began with. We evolved with the introduction of page speed and within itself, right? How our lighthouse or whatever now it's called, the page speed came into existence, right? The first part of importance was images and how we deal with it in how we implement it, right? The primary thing was to for a user who comes into our page, the first image, if it's above the fold, is loaded eagerly. When I say eagerly, what it means is it is based on your network speed, and the dimensions of the images are set such that there won't be a CLS that Anish was talking about earlier. The user won't see a jump or the layout redefining itself, such that the loading of images is faster. And everything which the user does not see is need not be used. So we lazily load all of them, right? As I was talking about dimensions, so some of the things we would take into consideration was, let's say there is a Facebook widget or an ad that you would like to be placed, since it's a monetary aspect as well, and we have to handle CLS in the same way. We have dimensions set with a background to it, such that the user has feedback that something is going to come here and I'm looking forward to it, right? So after all of this was done, let's say the first thing was an image in your site, and you had a slow connection that you are running over. What is the thing we had to do was we had to figure out a faster way to load your image. That is where the introduction of WebP came in. So it has a compression rate of about 30% to 40% with respect to PNG that we used earlier, right? So 40% reduces the bandwidth or the time taken for the image to come to your view, such that it feels like, or the perceived experience is, and the actual is much better than what it was, right? So we took care of all of our images and stuff like that. We sort of
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry to cut you there, Jeevan. So I have a basic question on the images part, right? When you say that you are basically lazy load the images, defer the images, right? That's what I understand here. So is the end user, the one who's reading the article, is he going to see if an image comes first, is he going to see a blank page and then an article going to come? Is he going to realize that?
No. So let's say there is an image and there are text below it. So the text is presented since it's the lowest form of the lowest unit, and then the image is painted according to what the network speed is. But yeah, that's how it works.
Okay, cool. So probably we'll move on. I think, Jeevan, a quick thing. Someone from the audience is not able to hear you properly, so you might want to come closer to the mic. Yes, please continue.
Yeah. So the next thing we sort of ventured into was selective hydration, right? That is a pattern or a technique with React, such that what it does is, let's say you have a page and you have buttons in it, right? We don't want to go through the site or through your page to see attach a principle called hydration, which means attaching events to any of your action buttons. For example, let's say there is one button, you don't need to hydrate the entire page for it. We just hydrate the button, right? So that is what we selectively did, which sort of reduced the churn of our JavaScripts, right? So after this was done, we basically looked at what the cause of perceived slowness in our page, right? There were scripts which is external to our site. For example, the ads, the notifications, the widgets which might be placed in our page. We proceeded with differing them. What I mean to differ is the essential of the site. Let's say the images, the text are loaded first, and then when everything is sorted, it will fall back to your scripts. So by this, we achieved a pretty good result, right? So on your left, you can see the scores which were there. For example, ABC as a domain, our FCP, the TTI, the TBT that we happened to mention earlier were on scores of or on the level of 21, 17, 23 and stuff like that, right? So after we deferred our scripts and we said that, okay, these are the essentials for the site to load, and this is what we want, right? It gave a peak performance of 70 and above, right? So this was a fantastic improvement that we sort of got as a result of whatever page speed has informed us and our effort in getting it through, right?
So Jeevan, before we move on, I have a quick question on this, right? Yes, I understand the image part. So is your, on a nutshell, if I need to understand, is the order on the chronological order, right? Is the images are deferred? It's going to see a skeleton kind of thing first, and then probably the scripts are also deferred, and the ad scripts and the things are going to load. So that's the order it's going to load, right? Probably a text, an image, and the ad. That's what contributes the whole thing. Is it what you're saying?
It's a progressively loaded site. Yes.
I understand. So, but the end user is not going to see any of this difference going to happen, and it's just the order what we are talking about.
Correct. Yes. The perceived experience will not change. It will just get pleasant than what it was.
Great. Great.
So this sort of cleared out some of the hurdles we faced on the browser side of things, which means the clients, what they see and stuff like that, right? So the other end, which would be our servers or our database queries or our API connections, everything, right? So we looked at monitoring our servers, which is through APM, right? What we figured out was once we started implementing and seeing the traces of our function calls or how the server responds to each of our requests, right? So you shoot a request to our servers and it gets back in like 1 second or one x seconds, right? So here we can see a graph which says that, okay, for every request which has come in, these are the functions which are executed. These were the API calls which were made to get that data. This is how we'll show it within this time. So this gave us a boost of reducing our response time by more than 30%. Right? So any user that comes into your site has better response from our service, and it will feel like, okay, it's much faster than what it was.
Great. So all these things are done over a period of time, right, Jeevan? I'm sure that all these things are done not at one shot. So do we have any data we want to talk about how these improvements or tweaks have resulted, what result you're seeing? Are we seeing any improvement in the customers' actual traffic or revenue or any such pattern? Do you have it handy?
So yes, I do have some of the metrics which we gained from our publishers, but I just want to reiterate that what Anish sort of quoted earlier, right? Content makes a lot of difference in how the page sort of improves in itself. Although I'll get to the first part of the question in this last slide. Right. So to getting back to the earlier question or the earlier flow, we sort of, after we fixed our servers to a certain extent, we looked at UX, because that was one of the things which were highly impactful to the end user. Right? So you can see the first row here on the screen. It starts at 2 seconds and there is a wide screen, right, till 2.6. With this as a user, I wouldn't be really intrigued that something is going to come. All I would do is hit the back button, go somewhere else, right? And that's not really what we want. So we introduce something called a critical CSS. What it essentially does is, since the beginning, let's say on the 2th second or the second of it, it starts showing you the result, which is progressive. You can see that from 2 to 2.5, you have something on your screen. From 2.6, it's progressively loading to 3, and you have the full screen, right? As opposed to the earlier one. So this, at least to analysis, at least what Google has shown us is that using critical CSS keeps your user on your site. It doesn't have a dropout. It will reduce your dropout rate, right? So after this was done, we sort of moved into 2 things. One was how to make your page even faster, right? We introduced something called edge networks, which are usually known as CDNs, right? How a CDN usually works is we have tiny servers located in your region, such that once you ping it, it will respond faster than connecting it to somewhere in US or traveling halfway around the world, right? So that gave us a big boost. Post that, we sort of ventured into the internals of how our source code or the code we have is built, right? So we introduced an architecture decision or a pattern which is called chunking. It says that, okay, I have visited page A. I don't need whatever code is required to render page B. Such that all our JavaScript parsing is much reduced and it sort of is minimized. So that gave us a boost in how the JavaScript is parsed through our browser. Right.
So Jeevan, in a nutshell, if my understanding is right, whatever is important to the user in a particular viewport, in terms of the data, in terms of the image, in terms of scripts, CSS, all these things alone is prioritized and then loaded, packed, and sent to the user. Is my understanding right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Correct.
Great. How are we managing this, right? So majority of the traffic is going to be served from the edge networks and caching networks and all this stuff. So what if the caching is down, the CDN layer or so is down? We all know that one such incident happened in the past few, I think last month or so, right? So is all my traffic is going to hit the origin, and then how are we going to manage the traffic?
So let's say in that one of a situation that our CDN network goes down, right? We have a backup CDN ready in place. It's a one-liner change, should be no less than a minute to get our backup CDN up in the scale. I don't think there should be an downtime which should be expected out of this.
Great. So that's good to know. Moving on, I have one last question before you finish. So one big challenge as an engineering team is how do you ensure that it's a typical SaaS setup in Pentagon, right? So how do you ensure every single build we ship is not deteriorating in terms of performance, right? So I'm sure that as a typical SaaS practice, we do multiple builds and into the production live environment, and then we do have 100+ publishers on board. How are you managing every such build is going out there without a deteriorating effect?
I think the industry is facing this as a whole, where a large team is sort of collaboratively putting their efforts into a single product, and there would always be concerns on where the performance numbers are going, right? So in Quintype, what we do is we have a CI integration, which basically says that for every code which comes into our repo, check those performance. If the performance dips, do not even allow it inside. Right. So this has sort of held its stability, and we have always seen a progressive inclination in our numbers. So I think as a suggestion as well, it's good to have something tracking your metrics every time you try to push a code inside it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jeevan. So we have come to the last part of the webinar. So as a closing thought, so Anish, I have a question to you as a closing thought. What do you, what would be a one piece of advice to our publishers out there, especially those who are managing newsroom and the digital published room as well, right? So what would be one piece of advice? Do you want them to go back and then implement, keep tweaking their metrics, or what strategy they can that you would like to advise them?
So about core web vitals, in that case, and what I'll tell you is that don't be scared about that. So it's going to evolve, right? So what the main thing that what you have to do is to check out that whether the content is proper and the perceived user experience is good or not. Okay, that's the most important part, right? Google PageSpeed Insight and all that actually gives you a number, right? But whether the actual experience of the user is good or not, that you check, and also make sure that you have a good infrastructure with you, which will allow a better performance for the website, which might be the like what Jeevan had mentioned about the CDN networks or the way that you actually develop the site. That is something that you can actually look at and make sure that the user experience is better.
Great. Jeevan, one last closing thought from you. I'm sure a lot of tech folks out there, trying to understand what we have done in Quintite, which comes out of the box for not only for core web vitals, for other search algorithm, other best practices as well, which is packed as part of our front end application. What would be one piece of advice for them? That can they start if they wanted to start tweaking?
Okay. So probably the best piece of advice or what we have learned from PageSpeed is that there is no definite answer for what the PageSpeed sort of lists or suggests, right? If you think of a solution, if you think that could help, or you can look at the community for answers on what they've implemented already and it worked out very well. Do try follow that, connect to people. That will give much more insight than number of codes or the number of features or fixes you try to push into it for scores.
Great. And there's one question I'm just reading out, is how much impact the quality of the images are going to be there, and how are they going to impact the page loading speed and all these things? Probably I want to break this question into two, Jeevan. Do you think that the image quality matters? The second part is, how do we handle that in fintech?
uh, I'll answer the quality part, right? So let's say the quality is at 1080 pixels and you're trying to load a 3000 by 3000 on a screen which is just 640. In that case, yes, the page speed is definitely impacted there because you don't really need to serve a 3000 pixel image for a 640 screen. So what you have to do is you have to say that for a 640 screen, I would serve no more than 660 pixels. So the quality is also good and the ratio to what you deliver is well maintained.
Great. The second part of the question is, how do we manage that in Quintite? Probably I'll try my best to answer that question. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeevan. We do have in Quintite, we do have our image processing service providers as our partners, right? So they ensure it's integrated resolution. So they ensure that the right image dimension, right? The image is delivered in the right dimension, the most optimal way in terms of quality, in terms of the dimension, and in term and to what is right to the network from where that particular request is being requested. So we do have more than one such provider onboarded, and then we work with them. So it comes as a bundle, and then we're able to manage good quality image, which in turn is helping us the overall service as well. Yes. So that brings us to the end of the session. Probably we have one more minute. If any, we can wait for more questions if at all there's any out there. Yes. There's a conversation happening in the chat window which says that the results vary greatly even when done within minutes. So average results of 5 to 6 tests, for example, to get better results. Yes, I mean, we always calculate average results, and we really can't get the exact number what we're talking about, right? It gives us a trend. Even when we release builds out there, we do run multiple times and then take an average of, or most of the times the results are same. We do use Lighthouse integrated with our CDN, which gives us more or less same result what can be expected once we push the web. Pretty much all the questions. I'm not seeing any unanswered questions. Thank you so much everyone for attending this webinar, and hope it is useful for the publishers out there and also the tech community out there. We're going to leave the recording of this session, and you're going to receive a recording of this webinar as well. Feel free to reach out to us on for any discussions or any networking, please reach out to us. And thank you so much. Please drop in your feedback as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.